Hello, I'm Alexandra Shapalina and this is Eastern Europe Review, a joint production of BELSAT and TVP World, with the reports and analysis from Ukraine, Belarus and Russia. And these are the stories for today. Belarusians fleeing dictatorship to be replaced by migrant workers from the Middle East.
Lukashenka's regime doesn't need smart or qualified people. They just need people who work to produce something, at least somehow.
Russian military intelligence triumph. A Russian spy infiltrates the top of the Moldovan army.
What has been published now is just the tip of the iceberg.
Without water and hope for a better future, 1 year after Russia's attack on the Kakhovka dam.
Water is as valuable as gold now. Our garden produce is dying. We're suffering too.
Belarusian officials have devised their own methods to address the acute staff shortage in Belarus. This information comes from a confidential document from the Ministry of Internal Affairs shared with the BELSAT TV channel by the Association of Former Security Forces Employees, BELPOL. The strategy includes prohibiting Belarusians from leaving the country and employing migrants to replace those who have already left.
Belarusian officials are aiming to address staff shortages through coercive measures, including a potential ban on citizens leaving the country. Additionally, they're planning to recruit foreigners to fill the labor gaps.
We've got a complete mess and laxity in personnel management. It's necessary to ensure that personnel and their movements are under control.
A new personnel policy stems from a confidential resolution of the Ministry of Internal Affairs titled "On the Approval of the Program for the Implementation of the Migration Policy Concept," obtained by the Association of Former Security Forces, BELPOL. According to the National Statistics Committee of Belarus, as of May 1st, 2024, the country is facing a shortage of 145,000 workers. Almost all industries are experiencing staff shortages, with locksmiths, drivers, doctors, electricians, nurses and tractor drivers being in the highest demand.
After 2020, a huge number of Belarusians left the country, primarily for political reasons, and this is still going on today. But economic factors have now been added to the reasons for leaving, because the correlation between wages and prices in the country just doesn't correspond.
Security forces are tasked with implementing the new personnel policy. According to the obtained document, they are instructed to assess the necessity of imposing restrictions on the right of citizens of the Republic of Belarus to leave the country.
They have a so-called force apparatus for this, a coercion apparatus to prevent Belarusians from leaving. A Belarusian who won't be able to leave the territory of the Republic of Belarus, like it or not, will have to think about where to get a job, because they need to eat and pay for an apartment.
The KGB and the Ministry of Internal Affairs will also collaborate on developing measures to attract foreign labor to the country. It is planned that the procedure for obtaining a permanent residence permit will be simplified for migrant workers. Health insurance will be provided and efforts will be made to ensure their social and cultural adaptation. An advertising campaign will be organized abroad to highlight the advantages of working in Belarus. According to BELPOL, the main PR efforts will target the countries of Central Asia.
Of course, no one here talks about qualifications or the quality of work. Lukashenka's regime doesn't need smart or qualified people. They just need people who work to produce something, at least somehow.
It is presumed that the program for involving foreign workers in the Belarusian infrastructure has already commenced. This is evident, for instance, in the medical sector, where doctors with foreign surnames are increasingly noticeable in hospitals and clinics.
In Belarus, there is no exam for knowledge of medical Belarusian or medical Russian. Most of the people who choose to work in Belarus have graduated from Belarusian universities. This raises the question, what level of proficiency in Belarusian or Russian language do foreign graduates from Belarusian universities have when they start working?
Despite its length, as it consists of 15 pages, the document does not outline ending the political repression which exists in Belarus in order to encourage Belarusian professionals who have already left the country to return.
According to Russian investigative journalists, the person holding the second highest position in the Moldovan army allegedly shared confidential information with Russian special services. Igor Gorgan served chief of the General Staff of Moldova from 2019 to 2021. Journalists managed to gain access to his correspondence with his handler from Russian military intelligence.
Journalists from the Insider and Little Country media projects have gained access to the correspondence between former chief of the General Staff of Moldova, Igor Gorgan, and his GRU handler, Colonel Alexei Makarov. Journalists discovered that Gorgan informed his GRU handler about the purchase of weapons in Moldova by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and urged Russia to send troops to his country.
It seemed to me that he wrote some messages while being drunk. There were so many ellipses, so many mistakes, such an emotional upsurge. It all happened in the evening. I suppose that he read a lot of Kremlin trash, and apparently, impressed by what he had read, he began to write, "Yes, let's act. Look what's going on with us."
Communication took place both via telegram and in person. Since 2023, Igor Gorgan has served as the head of the security service for the Moldovan branch of the UN Refugee Agency. He was removed from this position after the publication of the investigation by the Insider and Little Country. The Moldovan intelligence services stated that they were unaware of the former head of the General Staff's close cooperation with the GRU.
What has been published now is just the tip of the iceberg, because in 2015, when I was appointed Minister of Defense, I initiated a review of the combat capability of the entire army, including the equipment that had been repaired before General Gorgan took office. It turned out that 80% of all military equipment is broken, and its condition is very poor.
Gorgan's military career began in the Soviet Union, where he graduated from the Higher Military School in Novosibirsk. After Moldova gained independence, Gorgan continued his service. He achieved his high position under President Igor Dodon, who pursued a policy oriented towards Moscow.
There are a lot of people both in Moldova and in Russia who attended the same military schools, studied together in some other educational institutions, or simply worked together elsewhere. Therefore, in general, it's not difficult for Russian intelligence to find informants.
When President Maya Sandu took office, she dismissed Gorgan. According to journalists from the Insider media outlet, he has been working with Russian intelligence services since 2004. Moreover, Gorgan did not act alone. According to the journalists, he was helped by employees from the Ministry of Defense.
There will be purges. The Department of Defense has already issued a statement that they have initiated an investigation into all reports of Gorgan's collaboration with Russia. During his tenure, Gorgan reinstated many people into the army who had previously been convicted of embezzlement. There were even people who were suspected of working for Russian intelligence services.
Gorgan's actions could be driven by personal resentment and a desire for revenge against Moldovan President Maya Sandu, who dismissed him in 2021.
He wanted to retaliate against all his opponents, against all those who kicked him out of the army. He's a very angry and vindictive traitor to his people.
Accused of espionage, Russian diplomats were expelled en masse from Moldova in 2023. At the same time, Gorgan stopped communicating with his Kremlin handlers. shortly after the publication of the investigation, the head of the Moldovan presidential administration, Adrian Belarusian, announced that all Gorgan's awards and titles would be revoked. Belarusian emphasized that such crimes should be punished with the maximum legal penalties possible.
A year ago, Russian forces blew up the Kakhovka dam, causing one of the Ukraine's largest ecological disasters. The water flooded 600 square kilometers, destroying homes, contaminating the Black Sea near Odessa, and leaving tens of thousands of people without water. Ecologists had predicted a desert at the site, but a dense forest has grown on the dried-up reservoir bed. Our correspondents investigated the current ecological situation and how locals are coping with the water shortage.
A year ago, on June 6, 2023, Russian forces blew up the Kakhovka Dam in the Kherson region. This was the sixth and last stage of the so-called Dnipro Cascade, a series of dams, reservoirs, and hydroelectric power stations in Ukraine. In addition, it was also the fifth largest hydroelectric power station in the country. After the explosion, water began draining from the Kakhovka reservoir, which partially supplied the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. Yulia, a resident of the village of Malokaterinivka, gives an account of her first-hand experiences.
When the Kakhovka reservoir was still there, we had beautiful sunsets. We went fishing and swimming. We never thought this could happen.
Yulia lives on the shore of the Kakhovka reservoir in the village of Kushugum in the Zaporizhia region. She witnessed how quickly the water drained away after the explosion.
The water is disappearing rapidly. What I film every day shows there's practically no water left. Here's the base of the reservoir completely exposed.
By the end of last summer, locals realized that their fears of the landscape turning into a desert were unfounded.
Then it started turning green. We thought it was grass. We hoped for a long time that everything would recover. Now we can see a green field.
The field Yulia filmed a year ago is now a dense forest of willows, reeds, and other vegetation. Ecologists confirm that the sandstorms, which had been anticipated along the exposed riverbed, have not occurred.
We had predicted the worst-case scenario and planned the first inspection of the reservoir's base. On June 30th, when we saw the reservoir bed, we knew there wouldn't be any dust storms. Nature is handling this challenge.
While ecologists are optimistic, nearby villagers are feeling the impact of the lack of non-potable water. The Kushugum community, home to 18,000 people, is facing severe droughts in their gardens due to the reservoir's absence.
Water is as valuable as gold now. Our garden produce is dying. We're suffering too. We buy drinking water, but we also need to wash and cook.
Water for irrigation used to come from the Kakhovka reservoir. Now locals are having to resort to using their scarce drinking water resources to save their gardens, which has led to a general water shortage.
There are several thousand households, and at least 2,000 are watering their gardens. The old pipes can't handle the pressure and burst frequently.
At least 10 villages in the Zaporizhia region near the reservoir are faced with the following difficult situation: no water for irrigating the land and insufficient drinking water. Some residents resort to collecting rainwater for their gardens.
It's a big problem, especially after the dam explosion. We have to find solutions to water our plants and bathe. We collect rainwater from gutters.
Drilling new wells isn't a solution. Researchers who have recently returned from inspecting the reservoir have reported significant water quality issues.
The results show that the remaining water is not at all sufficient in order to dilute and purify the sewage from Zaporizhia. There's an increase in nitrogen compounds and a deficit of dissolved oxygen. We need to prepare and find technical solutions for modern modernizing the city's aeration station.
Though the ecosystem around the dried-up reservoir is developing and the Dnipro River is flowing freely again, the situation for people and farms remains dire. Between 2 and 4 million Ukrainians still lack necessary water supplies.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching Eastern Europe Review. We will be back next week with our news stories. I'm Alexandra Shepalina. Keep watching TVP World and see you next time.